The Taliban stronghold on Afghanistan is once again growing. What does that mean for the rights of women and girls in that country? I'm Angela Ray. This is DC Breakdown. Let's get started.
Breaking through the rhetoric, breaking down the issues. From the nation's capital, this is DC Breakdown.
Under Taliban rule, women and girls in Afghanistan were treated more like property than human beings. Their rights to live as they choose could change dramatically with the resurgence of the Taliban. We are honored to have Christina Finch, Managing Director for the Identity and Discrimination Unit at Amnesty International, join us here in the studio. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
I remember when George W. Bush and Laura Bush left the White House. He promised to keep his silence, during the next presidency, which was President Obama. But one of the things he and his wife did come out and say is, please, please, don't leave Afghanistan to the point that we neglect the women and children, because so much progress had been made. And now the Taliban is starting to smell itself again and resurge. And so we are very concerned for women and girls and the progress that's been made.
Well, absolutely. Amnesty International is very concerned about women's human rights in Afghanistan. We don't take a position on troop withdrawal, but what we can say is that we are concerned that we have seen an increase in violence against women in Afghanistan, and women's rights continue to be under threat, not just from a resurgence of the Taliban and other insurgent groups, but also from the present government, who needs to stand up and be more proactive on women's human rights issues.
Well, and I agree with you. And Karzai has, one minute we feel like he's on our side, the next minute he's not. He's not on our side. Okay, everybody, he's not on our side. And I don't see anything that he's done that's been so cutting edge or revolutionary with respect to righting some serious wrongs with respect to women and girls, and the amount of time that the Taliban has ruled that country. It sort of started during that Soviet Union war that lasted for almost 10 years, but he hadn't done anything to help.
Well, he has attempted to take certain measures. He had passed the Elimination of Violence Against Women law, but let's not forget that that law has been attempted to be watered down.
Right.
Women have been left out of the negotiating process when the Taliban, insurgent groups, the Afghan government, and the United States are coming to the table to talk. Women have been left out of that process. In fact, I just received an email last week from the Afghan Women's Network talking about the fact that women have been left out of the current discussions around how the election will be resolved.
And just want to make sure everybody understands, there was an election held in June, and it is still not clear who is the winner. Two people have emerged as, the two that are jockeying for the position, but still they are looking at the integrity of the process, and we still don't have a replacement for Karzai. So that's up in the air. There are women, however, in Parliament, I don't know if it's called Parliament. There are women in leadership positions in the government. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. There is actually a quota for women in the Parliament. We do have there are female parliamentarians in Afghanistan, not nearly enough, and there are also attempts to water down that quota, reduce that quota.
So the quota that's currently there, have they been left out of the process with respect to talks about the Taliban, what to do next when the United States leaves, women, girls, the whole nine yards?
From everything we've observed, yes, to a large extent, particularly in international fora when governments are coming together to have these discussions. Women are not meaningfully represented either within the government delegations or within civil society delegations.
And this is supposedly progress. Let's remind people of the way things were back in the day when the Taliban began to take over, because when the United States left after the Soviet Union and Afghanistan war, when we left, we pulled out, we just kind of did this, and that allowed the Taliban to rise to power. And at first it looked great. They were the opposite of the corrupt government, so it was great at the time. But then we learned, oh, no, they want Sharia law times 10, which means, tell us.
gross violations of human rights. So under Taliban rule, women were not allowed to work outside of the home. They needed a male relative's permission to access everything from health care to education. Very, very problematic, extensive violence against women. And so obviously there are fears amongst Afghan women themselves, along with the international community, about what it means for the Taliban to be resurging now that there's the security handover in Afghanistan. And again, it's one of the reasons that the Afghan women are so involved and care so much about the elections, the transition to another democratic rule. It's very, very important for Afghanistan to continue to make forward progress.
And we also want to point out that one of the things that the Taliban wants to make sure happens is that women and girls are not educated, so that the education of girls is in jeopardy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And what we've seen is, unfortunately, sometimes there will be acid attacks on little girls as they're trying to access education. Definitely attacks by the Taliban and threats to education for girls. And particularly in rural areas, we're concerned about this.
You know, it's just, it's so hard to listen to this, to see how a group of people can think it's okay to throw acid on a little girl trying to get educated. But the concern is, look, we're going to draw down our troops to about 10,000 as of this year. By 2016, we're out completely. So we'll have 10,000 over there for another year or so. But I think people are very concerned. Some people want us to leave. We understand they're tired of the raids in their communities. They just want us to train the soldiers and the police officers. But still others are very concerned that if there is no longer a U.S. presence, that's it for the women and children of that country.
So Amnesty International has been hearing concerns, definitely on both sides. So abuses by U.S. troops, what it means for U.S. troops to leave. And I think the security transition overall is definitely a time of great anxiety for the Afghan people, and particularly for Afghan women, which is why we've been working to make sure that the U.S. upholds its commitments to women's human rights. And several of those measures include things like making sure women are represented in the Afghan National Security Forces. If the United States is handing over security transition to the Afghan people, we want to make sure that Afghan women are represented in that security force, and that security forces have gender training, so that when a woman goes to report an incidence of violence, particularly incidents of sexual violence, that she's not re-victimized by the security forces.
Okay, so the Taliban, from my understanding, is resurging in Pashtun areas. Also, there's this this frustration, I think, that the Taliban is in Afghanistan, but that a lot of the leadership, it's in Pakistan, so that's really where we need to focus. But my concern for women and children seems to be more in the Afghanistan area than the Pakistan area. Now, I don't know what life is like for women and children in Pakistan, but I do know, I've heard enough about what it's like in Afghanistan.
Well, certainly there are issues with women's rights globally, unfortunately.
That's right.
Certainly in Pakistan, you've got an element of the Taliban, cousins, if you will, to the Afghan Taliban, which cause problems for women's human rights in general in Pakistan. And certainly when you look at Afghanistan, the resurgence is also a problem as well. So I think that the issue is going to be, are women's rights going to take a step backwards? Are they going to take a step backwards in rural areas, in the south, or Kabul as well? And I think there's a real concern about not only what it means for women in Kabul, but women throughout Afghanistan.
Well, this is a very prickly time. There's a lot going on internationally. Tell me, what can my viewers do to help raise the flag that we are in solidarity with the women and the girls of Afghanistan, and that we're not taking this lying down? What do we need to do?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked that question. Like I said, I'm in constant contact with women in Afghanistan, and what they tell me is that they want people in the United States to stand up and to stand in solidarity with them. They want to have a seat at the table. They want the constitutional guarantee of equality to continue, and they don't want a resurgence of the Taliban and their human rights further eroded. So what I would would ask your viewers to do is to take action with Amnesty International and to contact your member of Congress, contact President Obama, and remind the President and Congress of the commitment that the United States has made to women's rights in Afghanistan and to uphold that commitment.
You've heard from Christina Finch, Managing Director for the Identity and Discrimination Unit at Amnesty International. You need to pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Call the White House. They'll answer. Call the White House. Call your representative. But we have to make sure that women and girls in this region of the world, that they are taken care of. And I am afraid things are sliding in the opposite direction. Christina Finch, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.